You're terrible at it.
Well,
Next
not
time I
everyone
will
can
do
be.
it, actually.
Not everyone can be you, Neil. Can you please do it
Yeah.
properly?
No, I'm not doing it.
Okay, all
Maybe
right.
next
Hi,
time.
everybody. Welcome back to Always Almost There, day after show live. We are here today. It is a new tour. It is a new Goose. There's so much to talk about from last night. But can I just say, Neil, we are on day one of podcasting here. We are about to podcast a lot over the next month. Can I just say that I've missed this a lot?
We're so back.
We are.
So back.
In every conceivable way.
You're back
Literally
on tour. I'm
never
back.
been more back.
Yeah, I'm not in the shower today, so we're not fully back, but soon I'll be in the shower.
You're not wearing a hoodie.
Podcasting as I do. But we're not there yet. But we are back on tour. Here we are. Night one survived. You're here.
Yes.
And we've got, many more days to go. A lot of shows coming up.
It's a lot. Yes. It's a marathon, and I'm so excited. I mean, just top of mind going into last night, like I was obviously very, very excited, new tour. But, as I posted on social media yesterday, like kind of my wish list for the tour, and like top of the list is what we've been talking about. Like, I want that February energy, the adventurous spirit that anything can happen. And I was hoping it would come back. I didn't think it was going to come back on night one. And I'm very pleasantly surprised with how last night's show went, obviously based on the hasty train.
The hasty train,
yeah.
If you haven't seen Ryan's Substack today, I'm sure it's full of hyperbole and all kinds of things. So go check that out.
Lots of words. But what did you think, Neil? From the couch, and you kind of listened this morning as well.
Believe it or not, I actually listened to a large chunk of the first set of the show, which I generally don't anymore on West Coast shows because it's impossible to survive as a human being who has to work the next day on the East Coast if you stay up for the West Coast shows. But in any case, from where I sat, it was, really good stuff. We're going to pick apart the pieces that I want to talk about and really look into. But I think if you zoom out on the show, it looks very different than a typical Goose show, which is the thing we've been clamoring for. And the thing we might have been a little nervous about after the two sets that showed up at Bottle Rock, where they were very formulaic 2023, 2024 style Goose sets, which we joke about all the time with the 3-pack of openers and stuff. And Peter has jumped in on the joke and did it on the pod with us, but with an actual 6-pack of beers, which was remarkable. But in any case, I think when you think about Bottle Rock and you think about what that could have led to, that was a little scary. And then what we got last night was obviously very different than what that would infer that you were going to get.
Yes. Well, let's dive right in here. Off the bat, this could be a 3-pack someday, but we don't have the data yet. How it ends.
Go ahead. I just look, can we talk about the venue for a second? Because I have questions.
Yeah.
And we normally, when we have a guest, we talk to the guest about the venue, the vibes, and all of that stuff. So before we dive into the set list, I do have to ask you about this venue, because when I look at a picture of this venue, I say, oh, it's one of those new style venues where everybody's like right on top of the band, but it's not.
Yeah.
This venue is about 60 or 70 years old.
Yeah.
And it's a weird looking place on the outside. So can you tell me about what you experienced there?
Rectangular, like granite thing. The layout's super weird. Like you kind of enter underground and then you have to go upstairs into the lobby. The actual theater itself is really, really nice. As you said, it's older. So like the seats on the balcony have plenty of space. I will say I wasn't on the floor last night, but the floor looked very packed. And my main criticism of the venue is that there's no air inside. There's no ventilation and no fans. Or if there's probably some ventilation, but it's not very good. So it was very sweaty in there. There were a lot of people like going down on the floor during the show.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was really, really hot in there, and I think some people weren't expecting it to be like that. So hopefully there are changes tonight. Haps said where he was on the balcony, he saw there were like a bunch of vents right above him, and nothing was coming out. So hopefully they can fix that tonight. I did see security passing out free water on the rail. So, always good to see that taking care of people. But yeah, if you're going to the show tonight, just be careful. Make sure you're staying very, very hydrated because especially if you're on the floor, because it is stifling. No, the cap is like a tropical breeze compared to this.
Tropical breeze.
Yeah. I realized it didn't really hit me until like mid-second set, and I was like, I am soaking in sweat at the moment.
Because you expect
really
that in the
hot.
summer. I mean, it is not yet summer; it is May
Right.
still, only for a moment. But yeah, that sounds not so great. But in terms of the sound of this venue, good, bad,
Yeah,
highs,
loved
lows.
it. This is not Goose's PA. Loomis said that they get to use it for the first time for this tour on Friday in Bend, which he's very excited about. But yeah, for it not being the band's PA, it sounded great. Small room, and so this to me felt like, the February energy. Like your Grand Rapids, your Milwaukee, these smaller, 3,000-4,000 capacity theaters. And that's kind of the cool thing about this tour, because we're starting with 2 nights in the small theater. And then, we're playing these huge amphitheaters, and then a couple of more smaller theater gigs, some more huge amphitheaters, and then MSG. So we're going to see like all types of different vibe. And, there are certain jams that aren't going to happen on Friday in Bend because it's like sunset next to a river. Like they could, for the record, but like, I feel like a jam like last night's Creatures, for instance, doesn't happen at 7:45 p.m. like when the sun is setting. That's
what happens at 7:45 p.m. when the sun is setting and Goose is playing outside?
What?
The best shit.
The Westville Rockdale, I guess.
You think of Westville Rockdale, you think of the Perry Western Sun, you think about.
That's true. I'm just thinking more in terms of like the style of jamming. I didn't say they won't play anything good, because I have a feeling that they're going to. But I mean, that kind of like dark and churning stuff, that specific kind, doesn't happen as much when it's light out. So it's cool to kind of contextualize that when we're talking about the music and what the vibe is, because you're getting full Getty lights for this. The rig currently is insane. You have the curtain. There's so much going on. I was more off to the side. So and talking to some people who were dead center, they were like, yeah, it's insane. But
can I tell you one thing about the stream? I have one thing to say about the stream from the couch. Sound incredible.
Really?
I mean, better than streams I've heard before. Folks, you can disagree in the chat. If you disagree, let me know. But when I turned that thing on, I was like, whoa. Like, it sounded like I was coming right off the boards on Bandcamp, the next day or next 3 days or whenever we get them. But yeah, it sounded remarkable.
Yeah.
And I think that enhanced the show experience at home, because I really did enjoy even the mundane parts of the show, which we'll get into.
There's like one mundane part of the show.
Right.
And it has a When the Saints Go Marching in tease in it.
Yeah, and it's also a particularly hot open to a song. But so yeah, let's get there. Why don't we do
let's get into the show. So as I said before, it's not a 3-pack yet because we don't have the data on 2 of these songs, but it very well could be. So stay tuned. But How It Ends, Iguana Song, Flow Down to Open. How It Ends opener is the statement, right? It's, first of all, this song is in the rotation now. Like, it's not just going to be we play it at the end of a tour or whatever. Second of all, we're not opening with what you expect us to open with. Like, they could have very easily pulled a Mr. Action, pulled a Flopener, even like an All I Need or something that you'd be like, all right, an opener. But How It Ends feels like a very purposeful, like, we're starting the tour off, we're catching you off guard. This is not what you thought was going to open this show. And then following it up with Iguana, which is already expanding from what we saw in Mexico. The jam's so good. It is Rick yelping, Neil.
It is. You know what? I went back and listened to it a little bit closer. I just kind of assumed it was Peter, because Peter will do
Rick
that kind of thing.
Yelp.
It is. Yeah, it is. I didn't really think so on first 2 listens. And then I did my re-listen today with a very critical ear. And I was like, oh, yeah, that is Rick. And that doesn't sound like a thing that he would normally do. But yeah.
You got to cue it somehow.
Yeah.
And then the flow down, it's a flow down. It was fun. When the Saints
I like that. The flow down had a particularly hot open to it.
Really?
And it had the teas in there. And it was, I don't know, it was not the regular flow down treatment, which I get excited about when you don't have the regular flow down treatment. But can we back up a couple steps? Because I want to talk about these first 2 songs.
Yes.
How It Ends when they played it at the Cap, I was like, oh, it's an okay song. It's gonna be another one of those mid-set slow tunes, and it is what it is. It'll be like a Turn Cloud, sorry, Josh, or something like that. And then what they did last night got me wondering, wow, I mean, this song really it's special, and it's grown on me immensely since Mexico. Last night's version was really, really good. The lyrics are just beautiful.
So cinematic.
Oh, it's such a good song.
Yeah.
And thinking further on it, a lot of folks are talking about the dog tick, which, if you don't know what we're talking about, is Atlas Dogs, How It Ends, and Silver Rising being in some way connected. I've listened very closely to the lyrics a bunch of times now, which I hadn't when they played it at the Cap. In no way related. There is no dog tick, in my opinion.
Hey,
you've heard it here first.
And all that I am fades away.
Yeah, right, just that. So
imagery.
We talked about this the other day. There's consistent imagery across Goose songs that aren't necessarily connected.
Sure.
For a long time, people thought that Seekers 1 and 2 were connected to Elmeg and Travelers. They're not.
Yeah, real ones remember the Jive Goose Nugs playlist, the Heart, the Sun, the Arrow, and the Sea.
Yeah, that was deep.
If you remember that, that's a real deep cut. The saga that he made up about a bunch of Goose songs that we should dig that up. Next time we talk to one of the band members, we should ask them about that.
We should.
Like, Jive Goose made this playlist in 2020. Anyway.
Yes. So the Iguana song comes next. So for a 1-2 punch in a show, holy smokes, you and I tweeted like about the same time, the same thought, which is kind of funny. And yeah, that song's sick. We get like a lot of 2-guitar Goose now, and I don't know what it is exactly, and maybe it's just kind of a coincidence, or maybe it's not. Maybe Peter all of a sudden has said, you know what, I finally am comfortable enough on the keys where I feel like I can start playing guitar more.
I think that's
maybe that thing has happened.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really exciting about that is you get things like Iguana Song, and it rules. And there's like such proggy goodness in the middle of this song. And I just want them to keep writing proggy songs like this because it's sick.
Well,
I loved it in the spot.
It's just cruising. Like the jam, you're just cruising. Like that's gonna be a song that hits at an outdoor venue when the sun is set, like a first set at like Fiddlers or something. Like, when you're just nice breeze.
Well, you can't do a first set Iguana Song if you're doing a first set of only Into the Mist's closings. Just saying, Iguana Song doesn't fit.
Well, there's 2 nights. So what one night we'll have the Mist ending. All right.
In fact,
anything else to say on these first 3 songs, or can we start talking about the real shit?
No, Flow Down happens because they can't help themselves and they have to do something from the bag of openers. So there you go. That's what you get.
All right.
Yes, let's talk about the rest of
this. And then everything goes off the rails. The rest of the set, Born 1 In, 1 Out, Green River. Born comes out, and I'm excited to hear this song always. It hadn't jammed since Cincy, I believe. We had Goosemas, we had Milwaukee. I think those were the only 2 actually that have been played since, but both of those were the short version, no jam. But then when they bring in the slow jam last night, very, very excited to hear that. Of course, we talk about on this podcast a lot. We have for years that is, that's our favorite kind of Born, very Eugene-like space that they find here. Sorry, Neil.
I don't think so. I don't agree with that, but.
You don't think so? It's the early part. I feel like they always hit that with this jam, and whether it winds up being like Eugene, it doesn't. But the beginning of it, that hypnotic psychedelic zone, it's Eugene reminiscent. This is where it starts to stick out to me. Like Trevor's been practicing a lot. Like we heard it in Mexico, and I think of like the Mexico Big Modern, where he's playing these like very upfront melodic lead lines on the bass, which is not something that has historically been a characteristic of he only plays root notes bassist. And for the record, that's an old hater comment on the internet. I don't actually think that Trevor has only played root notes. But last night I was just consistently just in awe of the rhythm section for the entire show. And I'll talk about it, Trevor in particular more, and Cotta really, but Trevor in particular in the second set, there's some shit there that like even 6 months ago, if you're like Trevor's going to be playing like this on the first show of Summer Tour, I'd be like, there's no way. Like it's so far beyond where he was, 6 months ago, a year ago, And that's what keeps happening with this band. Like the more time they spend together, and it's like they're not just content to be like, wow, we sound really good, like let's keep doing that. Like they are also practicing on their own to get better. You're hearing shit from Rick, where he's, we talked to him also about like how he, is hanging back a little more, like doesn't need to be the lead guy in every single jam. And we hear that in the second set. They had the Big Modern again. Like, and I know I'm still talking about Born here, but
Are
I'm
you
just,
reading off your Substack again?
I'm
Is that
not.
what's
This is just
happening
how my
right now?
brain
Okay,
works, Neil.
okay, okay.
You always ask that. No, this is just like I'm just in awe of the growth, the musical growth of this band, and the communication that we're seeing on stage is just like astounding right
Mhm.
now. So you get this just patiently built Born jam, not the deepest improv, but like it's good and they're doing shit right, and then
Yeah.
slide right into one in, one out. First of many amazing segues to come last night.
Seriously. Like, can we underscore that point before you
Wow.
move on to the next thing?
Yeah.
The segue here is incredible because they're changing keys as they do it, and they do it in a really clean
It's just
way,
like
which there's no clean way to step from one key to another unless you're really super thoughtful about it, as far as I know. And that was improvised, right? It was very clearly improvised, and they did it so well. It's something they've obviously been working on. We heard it in Chateau. We heard a bunch of it in Mexico.
Yes.
And sometimes it's just kind of an interlude into the next song, or, that just kind of starts up out of nothing and then it becomes like the song, or you get something like this where it's a cool segue. And that has always been a knock on these guys. It's like segues really aren't their thing. They're no Eggy. They're going to go out there and do like a 9 segue set the way that Eggy does.
Now,
but we're getting there. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say, and I want to shout out a friend of the pod, Sim, for reminding me this a little while ago this morning. But Rick wasn't using the talkback mic very much last night. When you say like the segue felt really improvised, like it felt that way because normally when they're doing a segue like this, like Rick will call like, all right, now we're going to go into one in, one out. And the only time I saw him go talkback during a jam was to kind of help with the Atlas Dog segue in the second set. But that feels like I may be reading into it too much, but that feels like a purposeful move that they want to be just listening to each other rather than being in each other's ears and being like, all right, here's the cue for the next thing, or here's, let's go into that song now, and just kind of feeling it out and listening and kind of just communicating with a glance. And so I think that's a really cool thing that I noticed last night.
It's a product of playing together for a while, right? We just had Brownie from the Disco Biscuits on the podcast, and he talked about exactly that. Like, I've been playing with these guys forever. They know exactly what I'm going to do when we're in this key and we're in this progression.
Yep.
Right. And I think you're starting to see that pay dividends. In year 6 since 2019, when it all kind of blew up, of them just kind of playing together a ton. Right.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Now, speaking of things that you expect, here's this Green River. Right.
Yes.
And they go into Green River.
I pause you and say, I got to do the thing that I do whenever they play Green River and we talk about it on the podcast. This is my most common not seen.
It is.
It is. It's still my most common not seen. It's in like the high 30s at this point.
Is this? I actually wanted to look. Like they've been playing this a
38
lot
plays
since last year. Oh no,
it's 38.
Wow, it was only my second Green River. I guess they've just been playing it a lot. Yeah, they played it 4 times last year. Oh no, 3 times last year. It just feels like they've been playing it a lot. Anyway, if they're gonna play it like this, they can play it every show.
Absolutely.
So they go into Green River. I'm like, all right, like we had 30 minutes of really high quality jamming there with Born and one in, one out. Great segue, like, get a little fun factor going. I wonder what they're going to close the set with. And then they just go into this jam out of nowhere. And again, all the credit to Cotter for catching on to, Rick started speeding up a little bit and Cotter just kicks into this groove. And the pocket that materializes like within 3 seconds is so disgusting. Like,
yeah,
I don't even like 2 Guitar Goose at its best. Just like mind-blowing jam here. Like I don't know. I struggled to describe it in words. I listened to it after the show last night. I listened to it again this morning, but it's just like the fast-paced 2 guitar. But again, the rhythm section Trevor just like laying waste.
Yeah. I was calling it Green Take Me to the River because it sounds like Goose covering the Talking Heads covering Creedence. That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, they get in this pocket where it's not funk. I mean, but it is. I
Kind
don't
of,
know.
yeah.
It's super hard to describe, but it is the thing that Goose does when they play like Cross-Eyed and Painless. I listened to this like alongside a Cross-Eyed and Painless jam. I would think it was the same jam. I don't know, but this is sick. It is so in the pocket. Great. I don't know. Like I am also now at a loss for words, but it definitely to me kind of has that like Talking Heads ish vibe. Not like it sounds like the Talking Heads. That's not at all what I'm saying, and I
It
feel
has a
like I
Talking
need to
Heads
be clear
vibe.
about that. It
Absolutely.
feels like Goose covering the Talking Heads in this jam.
Yes.
So it's very important to say that. And the result is excellent. And I think this is a pretty interesting thing. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So not knowing what this was going to be, which would your preference be? The set closes with So Ready or Green River?
I mean, I would, if
You,
I had
you
to
didn't know
pick
what was
not
going to happen.
hearing it, I would probably
Yeah,
pick the So Ready.
you would. Okay. And then now having heard this jam, which would you prefer?
Well, do
Perennials
you
first set
really have
closer,
to
So
ask
Ready or
a
this?
jam or a So Ready I've heard
So
17 times before?
play along with me here.
Okay. Yes. Next,
The
Neil,
point
I
I'm
would
trying to
like this
make.
Green River jam.
Yes. The point I'm trying to make here is when they do things that catch you off guard or it sounds different, like because I think if we had Jive on right now, Jive would say hard pass on Green River forever, and I would strongly disagree with him on this one. I like it when they do different things. I like different things closing the first set because I do think they have a little bit of a formula with that, and this is indicative. It's not just the opener; it's the first set closer too that feels a lot different, and the result is I don't know, you're excited about it. And then, of course, this jam goes to where it goes to, and then it starts a whole arc on this show that is just wild.
Yeah.
You think where things go to next, right after this Green River jam, it's bananas.
Yeah. And the crowd was weird last night because it's a West Coast Goose crowd. So it's like, I was saying walking out last night, like my biggest gripe is like the band was giving so much last night and it felt that the crowd was not giving it back in the same way. I think that's just how a Bay Area crowd is. A lot of like older deadheads, a lot of people sitting down in the balcony, kind of just taking in the show that way. So really interesting demographic. This is truly the where the median age is still very high. There are a lot of younger Goose fans coming into the scene elsewhere, not in the Bay Area. But this was one of the moments. This Green River peak was like pandemonium. It was like people going nuts because it's that kind of jam and it's out of a Creedence cover. And so the band walks off, to end the set there and set break, everyone's just buzzing. After a jam like that, after a segment like that, the Born One In, One Out, Green River, and just the anticipation with what was to come, it was sick.
Yeah. How is Haps doing? Was Haps fired up for this Green River? I feel like he was like super fired up. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, he was. All right. Should we talk about set 2?
I imagine we probably should before.
So there are 3 songs that make up about an hour.
Yeah,
first hour
right.
of this set.
I haven't done set times or song times at all yet, and
either.
I feel like they're gonna knock my socks off when I look at them. But
so I think I'm gonna look at pull up the set list thread from last night, kind of get a good idea of where we were at.
While you're doing that, let me talk about Big Modern. Wow. I mean, the thing that kind of struck me when I listened to this, Big Modern has yet to do like really intricate musical ideas, but I think what it does do is get in a space and go hard. I think every version kind of does that, and it progressively gets harder and harder and harder. And it reminds me of the arc of Thatch as a song, where it just kind of gets, a little bit better every time they play it. The only thing that kind of disrupts that theory is the fact that they did the, 40-minute version at Holmdel. But in any case, I think it improves every time they play it. I think it kind of stays in kind of the same zone still. I think it eventually won't. I think it'll do more, and I think it'll be one of their bigger jam vehicles, even though it kind of is already. But the rhythm section in this, Oh boy, and it just
Otter Ellis.
continues the arc. Like it's just nuts. Like they go
Let me
from
just
that
say,
Green River right to this.
let me just say, I had a
Yeah.
moment in the last few minutes of this Big Modern Jam, and where I was on the balcony, I was like overlooking Cotter. I'm like watching him play, and I'm like, how lucky are we that Goose found this guy playing in cover bands 2 years
I
ago?
was thinking about that last night. Actually, we're just like
This
really.
guy, like fall of 2023, he's playing in, he's on Zach Nugent's Dead Set tour,
Yeah.
like playing like this, and
Mhm.
nobody's scooping him up. So shout out to Goose for finding Cotter, and shout out to Cotter for being absolutely insane at drums.
Yeah, he's pretty
Um,
good.
like I feel like even he, I mean, has come so far from the beginning of last year. Like
Well,
this
I
kind of
mean,
play. I
I
mean,
think
and now being by himself, like that makes there's so much space during some of the jams last night, and where Cotter's able to play with dynamics so much, which we'll talk about when we get to this old C.
which is,
But
I
I
mean, that's the
actually,
secret sauce is how he messes with dynamics, right?
yeah,
But
and
yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with you. I don't think this Big Modern does what Big Modern usually does. It started in that zone, started very similar Mexico kind of building, kind of like a rising tide, if you will.
First
Um,
blush, I like it better than Mexico, but go ahead.
yeah, are you kidding? this,
Yeah.
this makes
Okay. All
Mexico
right. I
look like
thought we were
nothing.
going somewhere else. Okay. All
No,
right.
no, 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 no. But so I was waiting for it to do the Mexico thing where it like builds and builds and builds, and then you get that cathartic peak, and you don't get that cathartic peak in here. It just keeps building tension for
Mm.
23 minutes, basically, and then
Well,
it goes into another section where they get quiet and they build more tension, and the resolution doesn't come until Creatures. Like you
mm.
don't get any sort of um, release until the Creatures Jam, right?
Hmm.
So this Big Modern, yeah, it was just blowing me away. It feels like they were consciously trying to do something different, and that will just happen with the way that Cotter and Trevor are playing. Like Rick and Peter can be locked in with each other and listening to each other all they want, but Trevor coming in with this lead playing last night, the whole night, it's really just elevating the improv so much. There are sections of this where Trevor's just like emphasizing this one like kind of 2-note phrase, I think, in this Big Modern, and I was just like, jaw on the floor, like they're so connected right now.
Yeah, I
And so
think we talked
that's
about
why
this
I'm going to
recently. Yeah.
say like this is going high on my playlist right now. This is hasty,
Oh boy.
but this is
Yeah.
going
I,
high on
I
my
don't
playlist.
agree with that. I don't
Uh,
agree with that. I
and I'm
need to
going to
listen
say
again, but
this is not Big Modern bias, just for the record.
it absolutely is. That's exactly what we're talking about right now.
Hey, it's a
Um,
really good jam.
well,
Okay.
folks, if you agree or disagree, just drop into chat and let us know.
Yeah, let
There
us
there are
know.
people who think you rate Big Moderns too highly. I am
Well,
one
I
of
mean,
them,
and I
and
deserve that
I'm not the only
reputation.
one. Yeah,
I was very excited when they went into it last night. I do like that song. Got our intern in the
there he
house.
is. There's your
Yep.
guy.
Yeah, there he is. All right. You got any more thoughts on the Modern, or should we talk about
No,
this Creatures?
yeah, yes. This creature's bears discussing. It's kind of shocking. I don't
So
know. Nobody told me this was going to be good. I expected copious notes when I woke up this morning. I didn't get those, so I kind of actually went in pretty blind, which I don't usually when I listen the day after the show. Usually, I have 100 text messages from you, notably, and others. And I didn't get that last night, or I didn't look at it. And then I
there
was
were
listening to
messages.
this thing, and it was creatures, and then it wasn't.
Yeah.
And wow, I mean, this is exciting stuff. Again, we're doing something different than what we're used to. So it really takes you by surprise. And it took me by surprise. I was like, when you're just kind of listening and you're kind of like passively listening, there are songs that I will do that with, like Creatures, for example, when I'm just kind of trying to get through the set and trying to do the whole re-listen. And I don't ever expect Creatures to do much. And obviously that's not the right approach here, because this was sick. And then it kind of got me where it was like on in the background. I was like, whoa, like
Yeah. Like
how
what?
did we get here? And then I had to like kind of check and make sure that I was still listening to Creatures and we hadn't gone into something else and I wasn't paying attention. That's where I was at with this song.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because you're getting that standard Creatures jam like that. we don't have a name for that progression, and it's been around since 2019. Like we should have a
Yeah.
name for it, but it's that
No name.
Creatures Jam progression. And initially they went into it. Rick started doing it, and I was like, all right, this is going to be Creatures for a while. And my take is that this kind of thing is going to be the new normal. Again, very hasty because we are one show into the tour, but hearing last night, I think that they are just so inspired right now that we're going to start seeing things like this in every version of Creatures. Maybe not exactly like this, but I don't think we're going to get a 19-minute just straight ahead Creatures peak anymore. I think that they want to be doing cool shit like this, and these like little pockets of like dissonant builds that they're doing in here, and each one is it's a little bit different and a little bit more vicious. And you have the one where Peter does like that ascending synth thing as they drop back into the peak. Like it just feels like they're coiling and then like springing forward and then coiling again, and in a different way. Like it again, it's the communication, it's the listening. I'm going to say that so many times, and I will hopefully be saying that for the next month on every single episode of this podcast, where I'm just like, holy shit.
Well,
this band is
again,
so
to agree with you further, this is what we were talking about already. The way that Cotter plays with tempo and dynamics creates that feeling of movement. And I think that's something that the rhythm section is getting exceptional at. I think Trevor's learning how to play alongside the things that Cotter does and has done since he joined the band. And that chair being his chair alone gives him the opportunity to kind of take this thing any which way that he wants. And this is the result.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and this is a thing again, like we didn't even talk about the segue from Big Modern into Creatures. Like this is they're crafting these sets now where it's like narratives. And I love the ending of Big Modern. I'm not upset that they didn't finish it last night. There was a time not that long ago where I was like, Big Modern should never be unfinished. But I'm also a big proponent of, if you're way out there, you do not need to reel it back in. You do not need to come back. Like, keep going. Make that segue into Creatures rather than force the ending of Big Modern, hard stop, and then go into Creatures. They're just flowing, and then the Creatures jam gets inspired like this, and then they don't stop before going into This Old Sea. And This Old Sea expands the way that it does. This is 3 jams. Big Modern was 23. Creatures was 19 or so. This Old Sea was 18 or 19. And this sea is the greatest example of the listening and communication that we saw last night, I think. There's this one point, they're in that pretty standard, if you will, This Old Sea zone. Cotter doing that Leo ride cymbal pattern that I love so much. And then they quiet down. And again, that's Cotter playing with the dynamics. But they quiet down. Rick and Peter, do this back and forth thing. And this feels to me, I used the wave on the shore imagery before, but this feels to me like the wave recedes. And then the way that they all came back in and blew me away at the show last night. And I thought maybe that I was like remembering it wrong. I was like, they didn't actually do something that crazy. And I went and listened back to it last night and again this morning. And I was like, oh, like they did that.
It's a neat jam, because they don't take this approach with a lot of jams. It has a very, like, I've said this before, and I don't know if I like the words that I use to describe it, but very classic rock vibe to it. Reminds me a little bit of like the Broswood, like very Grateful Dead. It feels like Grateful Dead in spirit, and I like the way that flows. Laser waves.
Like that. I like that, Josh. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's not the deepest of jams, right? It's just
sick. It's good.
It's sick, and it's just an example of the growth, the musical growth. And then from there, this segue was like that. That was the text that you sent me this morning. And you were like,
I couldn't believe it. Like when I heard it, I was like, oh my god.
Wait, and they do this peak, and then I totally forgotten about like the funk jam section at the end, or like that like high speed chase jam that they do before falling back into the Atlas Dogs segue. And that was like really cool, the way that they just sped up, and it felt like Cotter just like pushing Rick and Peter to go faster and faster. And then the way that they like just fell back into that halftime funk was so clean. And then, weaving it into the intro to Atlas Dogs. And I like Atlas Dogs a lot in that slot. I was
two approaches to thinking about this Atlas Dogs.
Yeah.
And I like the way it shook out. I think some people who like to be critical of set lists and say you should have done it in this order, which I don't do. I'm one of the people on this podcast who doesn't do that. But I think there's a very easy argument to say just go right from C into drip field and then you get a full drip. But I'm okay with the abbreviated drip to get this Atlas Dogs in this spot. It's a great spot for it. It's I don't know. C was like a jam, so you didn't get like really a cooldown, and like you get a song in the second set.
Oh, you got a
Like
cooldown.
throw it in
The
there.
C cooldown was perfect.
Yeah, but
People
like you
shut up. It was beautiful.
throw a song in there in the second set. You know, it doesn't have to all be jams, and that way you get your Atlas Dogs in. I know they really want to play it. They got that bag of songs that they got to pull from every show, and then do it towards the end of the show. Just don't do it back to back in the second set, please. But just this way and this way alone, I think works fantastically. I agree, and the segue into the song kind of extends that jam vibe that we get in the second set, and
Yeah.
I think it worked out wonderfully.
Yeah, and then the drip field, yes, it feels like a bit of a quote unquote waste of a drip field because it was 9 minutes because of the impending curfew, which I would like to say, not the band's fault. They were on at 7:45, prompt 30-minute set break. It's just after winter tour when they have the breathing room to when they're feeling inspired like this to just play for as long as they need to. It's unfortunate to then see them have to truncate this, but it's Dripfield. It's the best Goose song, objectively, from a songwriting perspective.
We have Leighton dropping incredibly hot takes in our chat right now.
No, we don't need Labyrinth. Stop. Leighton,
thank you for introducing
Josh is trolling me, saying set 2 Labyrinth incoming. We do not need a repeat of the Fox night 1 from last year.
We have a variety of interns just antagonizing Ryan. It's great. I love it.
Love it. Yeah, and then Don't Do It encore. Big bit of energy. Cotter is still not singing the band songs, and I think that after Rick called this as Up on Cripple Creek in that Instagram video from Jazz Fest, like he should lose the rights to sing it. Like let Cotter sing Don't Do It now.
You know what's funny is like that's the exact kind of thing that I would do. I would just name a song
and so confidently, like, oh, it's Up on Cripple Creek.
Creek, yeah, of course it is.
But the best part about it, if people haven't seen it, I forget what the account was, but Rick and Cotter did like one of those like on the street game shows where it's like, you put on headphones, you got to name that tune, you can win $5 or whatever. But they played the clip of Don't Do It. Rick goes, oh, Up on Cripple Creek. And then Cotter heard it. And Cotter was like, dude, we cover that song. Like, it's not like he mixed up some like a song that he should know, which he obviously should have, but it was like, they also play it pretty regularly. So I thought that was
several times a year.
Yeah.
So,
listen, if you're going to jam out a Labyrinth for 25 minutes, let's talk. But
well, can we pause and talk about that for a second? Because I was talking about the Labyrinth last night, and not in the sense of like they should play it or whatever, but there are quite a bit of kind of proggy songs that they're playing right now. One In One Out definitely has kind of a prog rock section to it. Iguana Song has a prog rock section to it. And they're kind of realizing this prog rock thing that was always kind of on the outskirts of the band with the Labyrinth. And the Labyrinth has been around for ages. Long before Shenanigans Nightclub was recorded, it was played live, or so I'm told. At least that's what Greg says, Greg Knight. But in any case, it's neat that this element of music is being introduced to the band. I didn't really put 2 and 2 together when I heard One In One Out the first time, but listening to that in the same set as Iguana Song, it's like, like we've got a thing going here.
Peter's got something cooking.
Yeah, and I mean, Peter always has had something cooking. If you think about like Time to Flee, and it kind of has that kind of proggy kind of guitar line thing. But
yeah,
this is cool stuff. Peter has kind of found a vein to continue to mine for musical ideas, and I love the stuff that's coming out of it. Like if you think about those 2 songs alone, those are new within the last 18 months, and love it. Like, yes, more of that, please.
As a wise man once said to me, Peter songs, very goofy lyrics coupled with some of the most insane instrumentation you've heard. Yeah, maybe not the most insane, but like really cool instrumentation.
I like the things that he does.
Yeah,
and I like the lyrics to Iguana Song. I sing them all day, every day, unapologetically.
Big Rock.
Yeah, sheepskin cut from his mother.
Well, Neil, with that, we've reached the end of our first night of summer tour. Pretty damn good show.
Not a bad way to
Doing it
start.
again tonight.
We get to do it again tonight, once again in San Francisco. Heard a rumor that the band tends to show up in San Francisco. They try to, at least. And they've played some decent jams there over the years.
Yeah.
So.
In San Francisco. If you were in Stanford, they don't show up.
Oh, how about that? Yeah, I can see that. But
all right. Well, we got another show tonight, and of course, we'll be back here tomorrow at probably 3:30 Eastern to recap tonight's show. It's going to be a blast. Everybody, enjoy your night. If you're staying up on the Wednesday, good luck. Neil will probably say he's going to bed and then inexplicably be awake for the whole first set.
Well, if they keep playing cool shit to start the first set, I have no
Can't
choice.
Go to bed. Yeah,
man.
Yeah. It is hard. It is hard to go to bed when Goose is playing, especially if it's good.
Yeah, that part helps.
Well, without further ado, everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the show tonight. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us for our first day after show of Summer Tour. Of course, we will be here all month long, every single show, 5 or so days a week. It's going to be awesome. Love you all. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace.